This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Cass Midgley and Marie Delafont.
We interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world is a better place when more people live by sight, not by faith. Please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, you can support us monetarily in 2 easy ways. You can pledge
$1 million
or more through Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA podcast, or leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. The smallest contribution is greatly appreciated.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 238 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. Keep in mind, someday each and every one of us are going to fall asleep and never wake up. This podcast is free to all and free of ads. So a big thanks to each and every one of our Patreon and PayPal supporters. Today, Marie Delafont and I chat with John Willis from the Wayward Willis podcast. John is a father, Army veteran, and computer programmer. His podcast is called the Wayward Willis Podcast because he's kind of the black sheep of his family, the prodigal son, if you will. And yet, and this points to something some of us have noticed in our post-Christian journey, he's more moral, upright, ethical, and a person of integrity than he was when he was a Christian. You'll soon discover an incredibly kind, smart, solid guy, and he's the black sheep. I've talked extensively on this show how Christianity turns morality upside down, which is more evident than ever in this Trump era. Anyway, John grew up in a military family with fundamentalist Christian beliefs, and at the age of 5, he accepted Jesus into his heart and was baptized, for real. He spent the rest of his childhood pursuing his relationship with Jesus. But after reading the Bible from start to finish the second time, he began to have doubts about the accuracy of the text and the goodness of Yahweh. His deconversion began when he left his parents' home and started interacting with people of diverse backgrounds and beliefs. Though it took nearly 10 years to complete, the availability of the internet sped it along. While shedding religious belief, John also shed preconceived notions about sexuality, gender norms, and conservative ideologies. At age 27, John started blogging, tried YouTubing, and eventually started up a podcast as a progressive liberal atheist to publicize secular humanism and push back against the harms of organized religion and credulity. Before we get into our talk with John and Marie's monologue and announcements, happy birthday to Marie this week. She continues to amaze me and is such a great help and addition to the show. I love how no one could ever replace Bob Pondillo and the great 4 years we had together making this show, but Marie is nothing like Bob, and thus the show has taken on a different vibe and personality and voice, and both are good. I love them both and am grateful to celebrate both phases of this podcast's evolution, and specifically Marie on this week of her birthday. Thank you, Marie, for all you do and all that you are, just by being you. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who was a crippled slave and faced adversity after adversity, said this: "Demand not that things happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and you will go on well." Unquote. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, wrote this: "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." Unquote. And my favorite philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche, prescribed his formula for human greatness as amor fati, a love of fate, that one wants nothing to be different, Not forward, not backwards, not in all eternity. Not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it, but love it." Unquote. When I say be a yes-sayer to what is, this is the thinking behind it. It's impossible for us humans to have zero expectations, thus we're often disappointed. It's impossible to assign zero meaning to events, thus we take things personally when things don't go as we thought they should, and take on negative meaning within the narrative in which we've framed them. It's impossible to literally flow with the moments as they form before us, and truly love them just as they are, and have no desire that they manifest differently. And yet, that is the goal I've set for myself. Not yet another expectation on myself, or a way to should on myself, but something I know I want to be, and am conscientiously evolving towards it. Expectations come from without and within. Either way, they're destructive. Purge yourself of them. Often they spring from insecurity. Cultures are formed by the masses, often because if you don't dress like we expect, tend to your yard like we expect, like the things we expect you to like, fuck the people we expect you to fuck, then you might just be different, which might mean there's something wrong with me, when I know in fact it's you who are wrong, and if you don't get in line, march in step, and clone yourself to these cultural standards, you threaten the very identity we've formed around these clear-cut lines that keep us all safe and far from any reminders that we're all meaningless accidents, giant mistakes, who are here and then gone for no apparent reason or meaning or purpose or validation or dignity. But imagine a society that lives and lets live, that sees you approaching and says yes, and loves it, loves you. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll be friends or even hang out, but there's just no judgment. Please investigate the difference in evaluation and judgment. It's much like the difference in shame and guilt, as understood by Brené Brown. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. Guilt says, that was stupid. Shame says, they're stupid. Evaluations happen because we're people of agency and boundaries, and we can't avoid making evaluations based on what we see, and why would we? We say no to circumstances we don't like, and of which we can control, but people and their creations are not within our control. So we say, for example, yes, there's that movie, and I didn't enjoy it. Even the things we say no to, we start with saying yes, and not wishing that they or their creation was any different. It's beyond our jurisdiction. Sure, I would have done it different, but that's an entirely different movie. In the spirit of WWDD, Dave Warnock, who has ALS and 2 to 5 years to live, doesn't do anything he doesn't want to do in what's left of his life. So he's rarely resentful. He doesn't spend time with people he doesn't enjoy, so he's not tempted to cross over into judgment. If I find a person uninteresting, it doesn't mean they are uninteresting. They just are to me. And that's the difference in an evaluation and a judgment. Evaluation good, judgment bad. Evaluation says yes, and judgment says no. Judgment wishes things were different. Evaluations accept things as they are and their right to exist, and yet sometimes wants no further exposure to them. Religious explanations appeal to people who need for things to have meaning. Imagine, though, if you accepted reality, that we're all mistakes, or at best happenstance of evolving cells, membranes, mucus, tissue, firing synapse, and such. We are no more than ants or cockroaches. We're more advanced, of course, but only on the spectrum of meaningless things. If we accept that, and we have a delightful moment, some laughter, some sweet emotion, some joy, then we're surprised by it. If we think this world is just or fair, that it matters and we matter, and or we're part of a big overarching plan, then we're surprised by hardship when things don't go our way or how we expected. Buddhism teaches that suffering, pain, and misery are a part of life. And secondly, suffering arises from attachment to desires. Thirdly, suffering ceases when attachment to desire ceases. I aspire to stop assigning meaning where there is none, and there is none anywhere. Ecclesiastes was right. Everything is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I aspire to stop seeing my life and circumstances as something that is supposed to be going a certain way. I aspire to place no expectations on myself, others, or circumstances, and learn to say yes to what is, to reality and the form the moment is taking. Moreover, I want to love what is. I can always say no to those things over which I have jurisdiction, but only after I've said yes, and not wished that anything were different. We taped this conversation on February 17th, 2019. The intro music is by Dave Weckl called Just Groove Me. The segue music on this episode is by Sleeping at Last. Thanks for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is.
If you've been listening recently, you've heard about a member of our EA community, Dave Warnock, a former pastor, now deconverted, shunned by some of his family, and who was recently diagnosed with the terminal illness of ALS. When I saw him in March, my executive assistant radar went off, and I thought, this man needs an assistant. I don't want this guy spending a single minute of his time fucking around with administrating shit. So I'm basically Dave's assistant now, and I'm helping him book appearances on other podcasts with secular or humanist groups and the like, so that he can talk about what he's going through and much more. But fuck, if you guys know Dave, you know you can't just meet Dave and be the same person. The way that he is experiencing and managing his life during this period has inspired hundreds and changed a lot of mindsets to be more focused on the moment, more focused on what really matters. I'm not immune from this, even as his assistant, and one thing I've really learned from Dave is an appreciation for humanity. I hadn't realized how cynical I had become. To be honest, my experience with religion caused that jadedness. I've looked at humanity from a bird's eye view, and I've thought, what an interesting species we are, creating all kinds of arbitrary meaning for our lives. Aren't we cute? But Dave, man, he loves humanity. He is in love with humanity. The other day, he saw some privileged private school girls interviewing homeless people, and he was moved to tears by the effort of those girls to build empathy. When I think about how I would have processed seeing something like that, I think I would judge those girls. I would assume that they're objectifying the homeless, being white saviors, or something like that. There are selfless and selfish reasons for most of the things that we do, but Dave always seems to focus on the selfless reasons when he looks at humanity. Even the way I've seen him deal with those in his life who are processing his dying. Some of the things that people have said to him are things I would probably cut someone off for saying to me were I in the same situation, because I'm judgmental. It's actually a quality of mine that I like. It's what got me out of religion. It's what gets me out of toxic situations. It's what helps me challenge myself and grow. But of course, there are downsides, such as being unforgiving to humans who are doing their best. Even when their best is imperfect, I throw it all out. I understand why I have that tendency, and I forgive myself for it. It's clearly here as a protective measure after what I went through in religion. A determination to never be hoodwinked or gaslit again. But damn it, Dave's view of humanity is refreshing and is really moving around some stubborn neural pathways in my head, and I'm grateful for that. Additionally, his emphasis on finding the moments in life has been helpful. I've heard about the practice of mindfulness for years, but have a hard time getting into it. When he rephrases it as moments, I find it easier to get out of my head, anchor into the space that I'm in, and be grateful for the present, beautiful moment and the mind-blowing odds of it even happening. He and the rest of this community have also inspired me to say how I feel now. Do not wait. And that's partially why I'm doing this monologue. I don't want to show up to anyone's funeral saying things at the front of the room that anyone would be shocked to hear. Dave, I love you, and you inspire me. And when I think about how I'm growing and being challenged by being in a partnership with you, I'm speechless. You say that you're grateful for me, but I am so deeply grateful for you. And one of the things that's come up on the interviews that Dave has done thus far, which you can find on Life After God, Your Atheist Pastor, and A Better Life, is what does Dave suggest to those without a terminal illness in terms of how to live their life? Dave and those speaking with him realize that we can't all live like we're dying, like Dave is. We all still have obligations to fulfill and responsibilities if we don't want to be homeless in a week. So on Friday, while I was at a brewery getting drunk with my boyfriend and celebrating my 37th birthday, happy birthday, Marie! Oh, thanks, guys! I came up with this brilliant stout-fueled idea. Since we can't live like we're dying, why don't we live like it's our birthday? In my infinite wisdom, I recorded my rambling with my boyfriend, and disclaimer, this morbid humor has been Dave approved. All right, do I have your authorization to record you?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Fuck
All
it.
right, so here's my idea.
Okay.
You know how Dave is dying?
Yeah, Dave's totally dying.
Yeah.
Super dead.
Super.
Usain Bolt of dying.
Yeah. Okay, so, all right. So you know how we can't live like we're dying because we have responsibilities.
Yeah, as adults, as a living adults.
We can't live like we're dying. That's not good advice.
Right.
But you know what we can do?
Live like we're alive.
Live like it's our birthday.
I like it. Give yourself cake.
Yeah.
Let yourself have cake.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Do fun things.
Seriously.
Yeah.
If cake is the worst thing you put in your body in the day, then you're doing okay.
Yeah, okay, good.
It's mostly sweet bread.
I like it. For my birthday, I always take extra care to create space for myself. I take the day off of work. I usually spend the day alone because I'm around people way too often. I pick things that I love to do. Like this year, I went on a 25-mile bike ride and I took pictures along the way. I hung out with my partners. I sat on a patio drenched in sun, drinking a flight of dark beers. I visited a museum while on a mild sativa high. I colored in a coloring book while listening to Of Monsters and Men. It was fucking glorious. So if the phrase, live like you're dying, seems inaccessible and unreasonable, consider the idea of live like it's your birthday. Heck, live like it's everybody's birthday. Happy birthday, y'all! And now for some announcements. The Everyone's Agnostic Retreat is just 5 months away on October 4th through October 7th in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. No joke, we are nearly at capacity, so check out the details on everyone'sagnostic.com and click on Retreat to get registered as soon as possible. And if you want to check out the most recent episode on Women Beyond Faith, another podcast, I was the most recent interview, and there will be a second part coming out. I really enjoyed this interview as we kind of got into some details I don't usually discuss about my life. And additionally, we have merch still. We've got some magnets that say yes to what is, as well as some stickers. So if you want to order any of those, you can find those on our website. And if you become a Patreon supporter, you can get one for free. And in general, if you want to contact us, just shoot us an email at everyone'sagnostic@gmail.com. And if you want to get more involved in our community, you can ask to be added to our private Facebook group, our virtual support group, and or our sexuality discussion group. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And without any further ado, Cass Midgley, John Willis, and me. So, John, you are the host or the co-host of Wayward Willis, another podcast. You interviewed Cass recently, and I know that's an episode that's going to be upcoming. Can you tell us a little bit about your show and what you guys talk about on your show?
Yeah, so the Wayward Willis, the name of the podcast, is actually an allusion to the fact that I am the only person in my family that has strayed from religion. So the rest of my family, the rest of the Willises, are still Christian, at least nominally Christian to very fundamentalist. So there's kind of a range. But I broke away from that over the course of a long period of time. I'm now an outspoken atheist. And so what I like to do on the podcast is kind of go over religious topics that people may or may not be that familiar with and go through some of the history and the etymology and the evolution of those concepts over time within different religions and cults, and just kind of poke fun at it because it's so easy, but also be informative. And then our second segment on the podcast is always an interview. And what I really like to do is elevate voices that either have a podcast that I really think people should be listening to, or that have material out there that I think people should check out, or just have really interesting things to say. And some of my favorite guests have been more in the LGBTQ plus space, bringing in their perspectives and their relationship to religion, because a lot of them have very interesting stories, especially when it comes to religious oppression.
Right. Yeah. Well, we've had a lot of the same people. I was looking over our list of mutual friends and such. And well, I just know for myself, and this is true. I mean, Marie and I talked about this yesterday. Coming out from underneath the Christian bubble, or, insular village, I just constantly stretched as to how the real world works and how like real sexuality is playing out in people's lives, outside the box of Christian, the Christian definition. So yeah, I find those interviews fascinating. All of it.
I think that a lot of that ingrained puritanical view towards sexuality is something that we struggle with for a really long time. I think even once we're comfortable with where we are on the spectrum, we still kind of struggle with those norms and those ideals and those ideas that are, put into our heads very early on. And I think that one of the best things that we can do is just talk about it. Just keep talking about it.
Yeah. Love it. Perfect. That's the answer to everything, in my opinion. Talk about it. Let's talk about it. Expand the talk aboutable. And the opposite of just these parameters that were set about not only what you could or couldn't talk about, but what was true or what wasn't true.
Yes.
And I guess the structure of it was appealing, or whatever, or the meaning makingness of Christianity. But when you take out, it's almost like the walls of the maze. You take out all the walls, and it's just open space. And now let's talk. Now let's explore. And once you question something that you deemed absolutely true, and then you can re-examine everything in your life and say, well, if that wasn't true, what makes me think this is true? And of course, that applies to sexuality big time.
Yes. Well, and it applies to everything, really. And, especially when we're talking about things like what we would call sacred cows, things that are placed off limits, that are not polite to talk about in company, and those types of things. Once you realize that when you open up that conversation, other people, they have some thoughts about it that maybe they've been suppressing as well, because you're just not supposed to talk about that.
Yeah.
And then you can start having conversations and see that people are really more flexible than they seem at first.
Yeah. Well, that's cool.
So what are some of your favorite sacred cows then, coming out of religion, and the things that you're passionate about talking about now?
Just everything. Like, I think my big thing is that I have murdered all of my sacred cows.
Goodness.
Just straight up murdered them. But yeah, the thing is, coming out of such a fundamentalist, evangelical, strict, militaristic home as a child, it's one of those things that is very liberating when you identify those ideas and those, facts and truths that were told to you or that were given to you that you didn't really adopt. You just kind of
inherited,
had them. That once you realize that you can just do without those, then all of the bricks just start crumbling. People always talk about how religion is like a house of cards. Once you pull one of those cards out, the rest just kind of start toppling and tumbling down, because there's really not a big foundation other than fear and control. And, or maybe control is kind of a word that people don't like to really use about it, but I do think that it's false authority. It's this structure of unearned authority on the parts of clergy and, religious teachers that makes people just fall in line, and fear that keeps them from stepping out of bounds. So once you shed yourself of that fear and realize that it was unfounded all along, that you never even evaluated it and you weren't afraid of it for your reasons, you were afraid of it for someone else's reasons, then you can start being less afraid about many, many other things. And that includes sexuality, that includes profanity, that includes drinking, drug use, whatever it may be. These things that, as long as you have a healthy outlook on them and you're trying to figure out what's right for you without just crossing lines and harming yourself, then, it's fine. Explore, live your life.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah. I'm really intrigued by this conversation around the fear.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's that step to leave fear behind, whether we're talking about religion or we're talking about any other kind of system that people glue themselves to on earth to try to feel some kind of sense of control, or like that they understand what's going on, and the fear that builds those systems and the fear that keeps people in those systems. I think that's such a big topic, because it's not easy to leave those, to question those, to defy everyone else in the matrix, and to pull out of that. I don't know how we found the strength to do it. Like that's such hard work.
Right. Well, and I don't think that it's something that happens overnight. I mean, I have talked to people in the past where they've said, one day I was religious, then I read something, and then the next day I was an atheist. And I envy them, because that's amazing. But I can't really identify with that sort of cold turkey transition, because my transition from religious to atheist was painful and long and arduous. And it took a lot of learning. It took a lot of deprogramming. It took a lot of just conversations with people who weren't in that same bubble as me growing up, to realize that there are other perspectives that are completely valid. And just because somebody made a truth claim doesn't mean they're right.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's that one show that we had a guest on, and she said, I didn't lose my faith. I carved it out of my bones with knives and chisels.
Yeah. I like that.
It is, and it's different for everybody, but there's, I just wanted to state a couple of things. You mentioned how you were raised in a militaristic environment. Well, you, in fact, were in the military. And was your dad?
Yeah, my dad was in the Army, and his dad was in the Army. And so I come from a military family where, growing up, I was pretty sure that what I was going to do was join the Army. And I joined the Army. So, So growing up, my dad was very rigid, very structured, very authoritative.
Did you have to make your bed every day?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, and over time that kind of waned just a little bit. Like the rules kind of got a little more relaxed as we got a little bit older. But yeah, if we stepped out of line, being hit with a belt was probably the first course of action. We didn't get grounded or put on restriction, as we called it, until we were well into our teenage years. Up until that point, it was just, if you step out of line, you're going to get hit. And that, I was on another podcast talking about the shame and guilt over, you know, some of the things that the ideas you have and the attitudes that you have and the behaviors that you adopt when you are young and religious and kind of carry into adulthood. And that was definitely one of the things that was just really hard and really painful to shed when I became a parent. And there's actually a lot of shame and guilt over how I parented my kids when they were very young, while I was still shedding those last vestiges of religion.
Are you talking mainly corporal punishment?
Yeah, corporal punishment and just kind of some of the general treatment and shaming of children, you know, when they don't conform to your standards or whatever the case may be.
Dude, I concur, man. I've got 4 kids, and my oldest is 26, my youngest is 21. What was it? James Dobson. You know, we got all our parenting tips and ideas from Dobson.
Okay, James Dobson was a staple in our household. My mom had so much respect for that man. And, you know, I remember hearing, you know, when he gave his stance on corporal punishment, and it was all, you know, essentially like, just don't leave marks.
Spare the rod, spoil the child.
And I was like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. So how have you dealt with that guilt? I mean, have you maybe even like in a 12-step program, you'd go back to them and apologize or something?
Yeah, and that's exactly the thing. So my oldest son, and actually, let me back up just a little bit. On the podcast, my original idea for it was to have actually 2 Willises on there. And my adult son was in the Air Force and got out and came back in town to live near me. We have kind of established a closer and more loving relationship than we had when he was very young. But we had a contentious relationship while he was growing up, and he did a lot of things that he regretted as far as just, you know, teenage behavior and very irresponsible decisions. And I had a lot of guilt over the way that I handled the fallout from those decisions and that behavior. So it was always very contentious and very strained. But then once he got out of the house and kind of got this dose of reality, he realized that, you know, I was really trying to do my best. Like, there is no book that you can read that makes you the perfect parent. There is no podcast that makes you the perfect parent. You know, you can't just have all of the knowledge you need to raise a healthy, wonderful child with no effort. And so once he got out of the house and he was like, look, I understand you were trying to do your best. There are a lot of things in our past that I still kind of feel hurt about. And so he and I sat down and we had a talk, and that talk morphed into just general relationship parameters between the two of us and like how we're going to heal. And that it was so therapeutic and it was so good. And he and I are like best friends now. You know, he's an adult, so it's not like he's my kid anymore. He's just this dude that I hang out with.
That's so fucking cool. Like, see, you must have done something right that he was able to like meet you there and have that conversation.
Yeah. I mean, well, I like to think that I did something right. I mean, everybody can be right some of the time. But yeah, you know, I feel like coming to the realization that I screwed up and wanting to, you know, really, really wanting to make it right and make amends for it, I think was exactly the right thing to do. And I think that that's what he and I both needed in order to come back together and realize that, you know, we really like each other. We can be friends. Yeah. So I think that that's important. Like when you are raising kids, and this conversation is kind of going all over the place.
Good.
So
that's how we do it. Go ahead.
Okay, good. But you know, when you become a parent, I think that it's very hard in the moment to see whether what you're doing is the right thing or not. And there's kind of this, it's not instant gratification. It's this delayed response because something that you do when the kid is 8 might affect them when they're 12 or even later than that.
Sure.
I think that's the really hard part about parenting without religion, is that religion kind of gives you this framework. Like if your kid does X, Y, or Z, and it's very kind of spelled out, then you do this. And a lot of times it's you hit them which is terrible. But once you are out of religion, it's kind of like this. I have my own moral framework that is independent of a book or a set of stone tablets. And I need to decide A, what's right for me, B, what's right for my kid, and then determine whether what I'm doing for my kid is having the right effect or if I need to change that. And there's no guide.
It sounds like science. It sounds like you're doing trial and error and you're being honest about the results and you're adjusting as you go on and you learn.
Yeah, it almost is.
Sounds a lot better than religion.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is, I think another thing that we realize about religion when we start coming out of it is that they don't change. Like they are dragged kicking and screaming into each century.
Yeah.
All of the new ideas that turn out to be good for human welfare and flourishing are late adoptions by all major religions.
Yeah.
And so once you notice that, it kind of makes things a little easier because you're like, look, I don't want to always be living 1 century behind. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's not what I want for my life. And so, you know, you just kind of have to figure out where you're going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to, we were talking about control and like the reason that religion or the way some people use religion, and religion is co-opted all the time by people who want control. I think it's happening right now with the GOP, but that's another story. No, the power of holding something over somebody, and of course, like you said, fear is the mechanism. But I think about it in this context of child rearing, that we want control. I guess there's something very scary about laissez-faire, or just finding that balance. But I mean, I just know that came up with my wife and I raising the kids, is that it was sometimes it was good cop, bad cop, as far as somebody's really lenient and somebody's really strict, and sometimes it worked. But I'm just saying that I think that religion on the macro was used to control people, and I think it was used in the Christian home to control kids and to try to keep things from spiraling out of control. And I mean, the things that parents fear most, as far as their kid becoming a drug addict or whatever,
right?
And more than, I don't know, here I go throwing out a prescription, but I think more rules and morality, it's just I found that love breeds love, respect breeds respect. So when you as the mature one initiate love and trust and respect, and then I just think it creates an environment that fosters reciprocal of the same, and that's worked for us in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said about modeled behavior, and it's hard sometimes, especially when you're young and you have kids. It's hard to realize that the things you do are being looked at as a pattern for how someone else should behave. And I think that's another thing that, parenting without religion is a little difficult, because you don't have that rigid structure of how you should behave at any given moment. And you just kind of have to figure things out on your own. But I do think, I agree with you. I think that if you show your kids love, if you show your kids mutual respect, and you show them that you can be a team and work together, then they're way more likely to love and respect and work as a team with other people.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd even go so far as to say is that their behavior of acting out is an anger towards what they either consciously or unconsciously know that they're missing, and that is love, respect, and trust, or whatever. If they're not getting it, I mean, I don't know. It just seems like there's something innate in the human being that knows I really miss love, attention, time, spent with me by the older person in my life. And whether, they know it or not, they're going to cause a shitstorm just to it's a cry for attention or something, So you're going to mitigate bad behavior by both modeling it, and I don't know why this became a parenting show, but it just love goes a long ways.
Yeah. first I want to just say that I'm not a parent. I am a child. So I do have that perspective, but I just want to contextualize anything that I contribute with saying that I am not a parent. I don't pretend to know anything. But I was going to say that what I really like about what you guys have been saying is it resounds to me like what we say on this show a lot about how I don't know. Like you can't know how to parent. There is no one way to parent. Like you can't know the ultimate truth of parenting. And so all you can hope for is to release your ego around it, to do your best, to follow your the things that you observe and look at the results and adjust as you go on, to try to be as scientific as possible. And then to just know that you did enough and that it probably still isn't going to protect your child from everything. Like they're still probably going to be pissed off at you about something. Like that's my thought about it, that as good as you are as a parent, you're probably going to miss something or you're probably going to fuck something up. And I have to wonder if this hope that like once my kid is grown up, hopefully they don't hate me and have to talk about me in therapy. Like hopefully we would say, yeah, they're probably going to hate me and they're probably going to talk about me in therapy, but I accept that.
Right.
That's part of one person raising another person and having authority over them for 18 years, that there's going to be some resentment about having that, not being able to control those years of your life and having someone else make decisions for you. And at the same point, another thing that I was thinking about is my aspiration for parent-child relationships. Again, I'm not a parent, is that I always kind of hoped that if I had a kid that like the first day they pop out of me and I hold them in my arms, and yes, I have thoughts about, oh, you're so small and precious and I love you and you're small and whatever. But then also have thoughts about, I hope that you live a good life. Like I hope that you have partners that love you. I hope that you have a healthy sexuality. I hope that you have and just imagine the wholeness of their lives. Because I feel like sometimes parents don't want to see the full trajectory and the full experience of their child as they're raising them. Like they feel like they're raising children instead of small human beings with a wholeness to them. And then at the same point, I imagine that I would love for kids, and this is what I'm talking about myself, to be able to, once you come of age, to look at your parents and see them as a whole person. Like they have a sexuality, they have a spirituality, they have
Flaws.
their own hangups. Yep, they have their flaws. You could never expect them to be a perfect parent for you. They didn't choose you and you didn't choose them.
Right.
So you might have not been well fitted to each other, and you might have found that you have evolved past what your parents have taught you. And so that's what I try to do. I'm very different than my parents, very, very different. And I try to look at them as whole human beings, not people who are in power over me, but people who really did their best given where they came from. And anyway, so it's just a little rant here, but I don't know. Those are kind of like some ideals that I have around it. Obviously, they're not achievable, but, just kind of about not thinking that you know everything about it and just kind of doing your best, and seeing people as whole human beings.
Yeah, no, I like all of that. And I think that from a humanist perspective, that's what we really need to push is like, not only are we in the roles of parents and child, but we are also human beings with flaws, with warts and everything. And we're all just trying to do our best. And expanding on what you were saying, I would say that there is a caveat here, and that is, just because someone is your parent doesn't mean that you have to love them. And if you are genuinely hurt, and if there is something in your childhood and in your parent-child relationship that you cannot forgive, then don't. And do not beat yourself up over it. You can't change the past, and you can't correct the hurt without the other party participating. And so I get a lot of grief actually from some of the people in my life over my distant relationship with my family. Not that I've pushed them out, but just that I feel that even though we're related, our beliefs, our value systems, our, the way we vote, and all of those things, I think just don't make us as compatible as I would need us to be to maintain a relationship. And
well put. Oh God.
Yeah.
That came out exactly. My gosh. Anyway, go on.
I'm just dropping pearls of wisdom here. But yeah, just because you're related to somebody doesn't mean necessarily that they're your family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, especially once you become an adult, you can choose your own family.
Mm-hmm.
Once you are on your own, you are in charge of your life, and you do what makes you happy and what makes you healthy. And it's all about, your well-being. So definitely, I just wanted to put that out there because there are definitely relationships between parent and child that cannot be repaired. And it's not on you as the child to make reparations.
Mm-mm.
And I think that that's something that I struggled with my oldest, Logan, because I felt so much guilt and I knew that he had so much angst over the way that we related when he was younger, that I wasn't sure how that was going to turn out. And when he came back and we talked it out and, hugged it out and became friends again, that was actually just one of the best feelings in my life as a parent. And I hope that everybody gets that,
Yeah. But you're saying both, because you just said, hey man, it was the greatest thing to reconcile with my son. And if reconciliation is not possible, it's not the end of the world. Don't beat yourself up. It's okay to go to your grave having never reconciled with that motherfucker. It's okay.
Yeah.
So we're saying both, that if you can reconcile, it's the most wonderful feeling in the world, and it's not the end of the world if you can't.
Yeah. And can we talk about these? What I'm hearing under all this is this expectation that we have in our culture or in our species of like that there's this expectation of how you're supposed to relate to your family and forever. Like you're always supposed to forgive them. You're always supposed to support them. There's like so many quotes from so many movies that's just shrug. Well, what can I do? He's my brother. Like I have to be there for him. It's my mom. I have to go. Like it's always just, it's this, it's that, it's this label, it's this person in my family, regardless of whether that's a healthy relationship or not. There's this weird silent expectation that you have to put family first. It's not even silent. That's a literal quote. Like it's a family first, family first.
Yes.
Why?
I will tell you on this topic, and you just put it in my head and filled me with rage, is the quote that people will sometimes put on postcards or whatever, that love is never having to say I'm sorry. And bullshit. That is absolute bullshit. And anybody who thinks that has an unhealthy relationship.
Okay, so where they might be coming from, I'm just going to think out loud here like I usually do, but it'd be great if I've used this in the past, and I'm prefacing with I know this is bullshit, but I used to do this and believe this, and that is I wanted to surround myself with friends who were tough-skinned, so that we're gonna hurt each other, but we so love each other that they understand, why or how I did that hurtful thing. And so I don't have to say I'm sorry because they've already forgiven me. I'm just saying that might be a context in which somebody, I don't know. Where do you think that comes from, that quote?
No, I think that you're really close, if not completely on target there. I think that what it is trying to say is that when you genuinely love somebody, you are willing to overlook their faults and you realize that their motivations are still geared toward you, even if they hurt you. And so you are more willing to forgive and forget and move on in your relationship because you love them. But that's really not how humans work.
No.
Even if you know that somebody loves you, even if you know that somebody cares about you, when they hurt you and you don't know why, because a lot of times we don't, we can't read each other's minds. We don't know each other's motivations. And so no matter how much you know somebody else, they're going to hurt you and you're going to wonder why they did it. And an explanation and an apology is a really good starting point for healing.
Yeah.
In that relationship. And it doesn't matter how much you love each other. You're still going to need to say, I'm sorry from time to time.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what this makes me think of, Cass? Our interview with Dr. Eric Sprinkle a couple weeks ago, where we talked about, like, his big message was the fallacy of anyone saying that sex is intrinsically this. That's where you fuck up. When you try to define something as sex as ultimately this. Christians are saying sex is, it's a heterosexual thing. It's within the marital confines. This is what sex is. This is the best way to do
Penis and
sex,
vagina.
etc. Right. And this conversation to me is sounding a lot like love is. Like, people are telling us what love is supposed to be. But I don't think love, like, if love is to you supporting your family or whatever, I guess that makes sense. But I think we get to define what love means to us, you know, like, just like how we define what sex, like, what makes you feel loved? What is love for you? And oh my God. And this, like, turns into this whole other tangent about, like, if you're falling in love with someone, do you say you love them yet? Like, do you wait? Do you really love them? What does love mean? And so then you get that moment to think, what does love mean? How do I feel about this person? What does love mean to me? Because love came first, not the definition of love. Love is here first. It's so much bigger than this. This is, you get to define what it means for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that you just said is about saying I love you. And one of the things that really bothered me about my 2 previous marriages was that I love you became a way to not sit in uncomfortable silence or to try and mitigate somebody's anxiety or just this token of, you know, this is what you're supposed to say to somebody. And I think that was really unhealthy. That goes into, you know, what is the definition of love? Do you say I love you because you actually feel it, or do you say I love you because that's what expected of you?
Yeah.
And so my girlfriend and I now, I don't know if we've ever actually said I love you. We just have our thing. We just relate to each other. We just know. And I think that that's really important in relationships as well.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you were talking about is sex in a religious context. And I just wanted to point out, because it popped into my head, and if I don't say something when it pops into my head, it just
goes
leaves.
away.
But, you know, as far as saying that, you know, sex is within the confines of marriage and sex is only penis and vagina, sex is also the duty of a good Christian wife.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, I can say that from my experience growing up in religion, is that's what's taught to you is, you know, the misogyny and the oppression of women in religion is another thing that just really drove me out of it as well.
Good.
Well, and just to, I think, you know, to clarify where you were going, just for the sake of the listener, is that the obligation of the wife in the Christian household is to fuck whenever he wants it, because if you don't, he's liable to cheat and it will be your fault.
Though
Well, you know what's really funny? There's no rule about that the man is obligated to fuck the wife.
Well, that's because the wives are all like, eh.
Are we though? Are we?
No.
I don't know that we are. Some of us like sex. Maybe the men aren't meeting our needs. Where's our Bible?
See, I feel like, and that's one of the things is, you know, me making a joke about how wives are like, meh, really comes from this kind of societal framework that we've built up around sexuality, where it's like men want it all the time and they think about it every 13 seconds or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And women are just like, they're fine. You know, they just do their thing. If they want to have sex with a man, then they'll, you know, they have no shortage of men who want to have sex. So there's that.
That makes sense.
But no, I mean, in my experience, it's women have sex drives. Like everyone who's listening that doesn't think this is true, women have sex drives and they like to have sex. And so one of the things is, you know, you need to be very cognizant of your partner's wants and desires. If they don't want to have sex and you do want to have sex, then you need to be understanding that you're still a team. Like there are two of you and you both have your wants and needs, and you can have fun with each other and you can please each other, and it doesn't always have to be about one person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wish we would stop treating each other like a gender. Like I've had so many conversations where it's like, well, do women want this? Do women want that? I'm like, I don't fucking know. Like, who are you talking about? Like, it's not a conversation about women this or men that.
There's no such thing as women.
No, there's not. There's not. There's me.
There's just human beings, and they're all over the spectrum.
Yeah, you get to know me. Stop trying to make shortcuts and labels and boxes. I don't belong in a box.
Yeah.
Like, I'm much bigger than that.
Yeah. And in that context, I mean, the gender roles that we set up as a society are just tragically broken.
Yeah.
And then they lead to things like toxic masculinity, which is actually a thing. Whoever's listening and is getting triggered by the word toxic masculinity, you need to actually open your eyes and just look at the way that we treat genders in this society.
Yeah.
But you know, I've always had a really hard time identifying with the concept of genders as we've constructed them, because I don't do the sports thing. I don't want to go hunt and kill something. I don't need to like beat on things and do all of that. Like, I am perfectly comfortable being called a beta male cuck by a conservative because like, I don't care. But, you know, in my relationship with my girlfriend now, we always joke about our roles just being completely reversed, because I'm like the domesticated, caring and cuddly one. And she's like, I'm gonna take care of shit, you know? And it's like, yeah, okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
But I think that we need to shed those. I think that we're coming along. I think it's very, very slow. And again, religion is holding us back in realizing that gender norms and gender stereotypes and just the concept of gender in general is harmful and kind of useless.
Yeah.
Because aside from just saying that person says they're male, so they have a penis, which doesn't matter to you. Or that person says they're female, so they have a vagina, which again doesn't matter to you. Like all of these bathroom bills and worrying about people's genders. What is the point? You're not going around touching people's genital, or you shouldn't be anyway. Kids, don't touch people's genitals.
Thanks for coming to
unless
our
you're
TED
invited
Talk.
to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, all of that, like, let's stop worrying about like, are you male? Are you female? Are you man? Are you woman? Like, none of that really matters in the broader context. Let's just treat each other like humans, and let's like come up with some common goals, like combating global warming and making sure that we have a planet to live on, that kind of thing. Like, this is way more important.
Yeah, this makes me think of like all these different characteristics that you put in different buckets of male and female. Like sensitivity goes over in the female bucket, and then like aggression goes into the male bucket. And it's so artificial because really those buckets never existed in the first place. Those are all just human qualities on a spectrum that show up in different people in different ways. And the way that we engender people restricts their ability to be fully who they are genetically and otherwise. And so like, I'm not encouraged to have short hair. I'm not encouraged to interrupt a man. You know, I'm not encouraged to tell someone not to touch me. Like these ways that you raise women, and you guys are not encouraged to talk about your feelings or to be hurt or to be sensitive. And those are all qualities within the human range. And how fucking horrible that we tell people that this is the confines of your experience that you are allowed to have, and anything outside of that means that you are going to be shamed in your own culture by your gender. It's fucked up. It pisses me off. And I just like see a world where we can just release expectations of any kind of genders. And if you grow up and you're a little boy and you like princess dresses, but you're straight and you like wearing dresses, like, fuck, do whatever the fuck you want. I don't understand why we have to tell these people to act a certain way, wear certain things, do certain things. It just drives me nuts. And that's what that makes me think about, just the spectrum of humanity that's put into these buckets.
Yeah. Well, and especially since dresses are so damn comfortable. Speaking as someone who has worn a dress or two in his life, and we can talk about that if you want, but the difference between clothing and like the comfort and the look and just what is expected of you to dress in certain ways is so stupid. Like, I would absolutely love to wear skirts, but I do know how like I would be viewed that way, and like how it would cause distraction and whatever. Like, I don't really want to deal with that, and so I'm fine just being in jeans because I found some really comfy ones anyway. But yeah, I mean, it's so stupid the way that we censor ourselves and the way that we hold ourselves back from doing things that are going to make us happy because somebody else might feel uncomfortable by it or something like that. I hate it.
Yeah. I'd love to hear more about this skirt thing if you want to talk about it.
Okay, well, it was really funny. So my sister I have a big sister, and she always wanted a sister. And so when I was younger, she would dress me up in her clothes and put makeup on me and pass me off to the neighbors as her cousin from out of town. And but I actually enjoyed it. It was fun because it was like dress up and I could be, somebody else, and it was just playtime. It was fine. And then later on a couple of like occasions like Halloween, I would pick a costume like the bearded lady or something like that, where it was like I could wear a dress and I could put makeup on, and it's just fun and it's comfortable. Like, dresses are great. When I got out of the house and I started talking to people with different backgrounds, I started encountering LGBT people and realized that they were actually good people and we could have serious conversations. And then we started talking about sexuality, and we started talking about like what being a homosexual actually is and being a bisexual actually is. And it's not just this, nothing but gross sex that Christians hate and like just whoring around. That's not what it's all about.
Oh, no.
And so once I realized that, I was like, oh, okay. So we're not talking about just like massive orgy, fornication, devil worship. We're actually talking about relationships. We're talking about interpersonal relationships and feeling good and pleasure. And so then I started to explore and realize that my sexuality is actually pretty fluid. I thought I was completely straight, but I'm really not. That's totally fine. Like, if you start experiencing that yourself, don't fight it. Don't feel ashamed. Don't apologize for it. Like, it's perfectly fine for you to feel that way. And as I explored it more, I was like, you know what? Actually, I think I could be in relationships with anybody. And so I ended up in a relationship after my first marriage with a wonderful man who was just very caring and very giving. And we had a great relationship for a couple of years. And that was a great experience. But during that time, my dad was giving me the "you're going to hell" talk. And that really pushed me farther away, because just the damage that religious thought does to you. I mean, my dad is stunted. It's his problem. It wasn't mine. Yeah. I had to deal with his accusations and I had to deal with his judgment, but it wasn't my problem. It was my dad's problem. Yeah. And that's the case with everyone who is homophobic or just hateful toward people who are LGBT. That's their problem and they're going to have to deal with that. You don't have to apologize.
Yeah.
Just be you.
Yeah. Yeah, this brings up to me something kind of tangentially related, where it's something I've been learning in the last year, like the different arenas of sexuality and gender. Because I think what you just confessed to was being biromantic. Have you heard of that term?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like it's something I've been kind of learning recently. Like I thought that like, either you're heterosexual, you're homosexual, you're bisexual, and that's it. Like those are, or maybe you're also pansexual. There's a limited range of sexuality and it all has to do with who you want to fuck. And it's just presumed that if you want to fuck them, you do everything else too. But then I learned about there's these other layers of things. There's the romanticism. Like you might be heterosexual, but then biromantic, which means you're attracted to the opposite gender, but you are capable of having romantic relationships with all genders. It's not just straightforward. You can have this very complex sexuality and identification where you might be a transgender, demisexual, or something. Like there's all these different layers of how you could identify as, and then we're not even talking about the gender, how the gender expression, the what's the other one where you can present more masculine or feminine, and it doesn't even matter like am I male or female, you can present one way or the other. So there's just like this big old rainbow. It's almost like maybe that's why the queer community chose a rainbow, because it's really like everything's just all blended together and you can kind of just figure it out on your own. And that's why I think it's really interesting, because like I've wondered myself, okay, am I bisexual? I don't think that I'm bisexual, but I do think that I'm I don't know if this is the right term, but like aesthetic. Like I can look at women and be like, yeah, you're hot. You're like stupid hot.
Well, I can do that with men too.
Yeah. See, there you go. So, but then the question is, okay, well, do you feel like you're capable of or interested in having a romantic relationship with them? So then if you're not, then maybe you're still hetero romantic instead of biromantic. So like there's this whole spectrum for all these different assets of sexuality and gender and attraction that like I hadn't even thought about. And you really can kind of like make your own do it yourself kind of thing, like, and find out who you are. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it is. And the freedom to actually discover that and explore it is something that I never would have gotten had I not broken free of religion.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. It always kind of comes back to that, is like these restrictions on your thought and your behavior that are imposed by religion with this false authority really just stunt you from knowing who you are, honestly. Yeah. And that it's tragic, because everyone should be able to understand who they are and identify how they need to identify. And, I would say that with me, definitely biromantic would be fine, but I would say that I'm actually bisexual. Mm-hmm. But even when you say that, like, that's kind of a loaded term, because when you say you're bisexual, you could be anywhere on that sliding scale. You could be 90-10, you could be 60-40. I would say that I'm probably somewhere around 60-40, maybe. But that's the thing, that you have to get to know yourself. You have to be free to experience things that would otherwise be considered, haram by religion.
Haram?
Yeah, haram in Islam, that is something that's forbidden.
Okay.
So forbidden fruit.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, that forbidden fruit tastes really good. So sometimes you just have to pluck one off the tree.
So the theme here, and especially going all the way back to like, people using religion and structure to control other people, I think there's a panic, obviously, in the early, how far back, but people just didn't like the thought of being a dirt clod hurling through space with no purpose or reason or meaning. And so we're meaningless ants on an anthill, and it's so insulting and scary, and I can't bear it. And so I have to create a narrative that we assign and ascribe meaning to everything just so that we'll feel good. And then it gets locked in and passed down for generations. And then eventually some woke generation or evolving generations come up and say, you know what? This is my experience going back to what you said about the word love and how often, what do we mean by it? What do we mean when we say I love you, or how often should we say I love you? And I noticed that the millennials and such coming up in generations behind me, you just see it in movies and stuff as well, but they were much more agnostic about the word love than, say, my wife and I, and that generation of like pop culture romanticism, where we just walked right into somebody, telling us, oh, you're supposed to kiss at the prom. Okay, you're supposed to say I love you when you drop her off. Okay, I'll do it. We were zombies, just being instructed in a trance as to how romance looks and what these words mean. And I just am so grateful that emerging generations have come up and said, no, not so much, or maybe not. They're just really embracing a much broader agnosticism about everything. Like we were talking about gender fluidity and everything. It's like, nope, all these structures that have been in place for millennia to help insecure, scared people feel safe are getting erased. And it's scaring people. I think that's why, we see some of the behavior of people like doubling down or digging in their heels and trying to stop these things from happening, because it scares the shit out of somebody. For example, if you were in public, John, and you were wearing a kilt or something, and let's say a man sees you in the aisle at Walmart, and he is immediately angry and wants to hit you, and it's like, so let's talk about that, buddy. Like, why the fuck do you care what he's wearing? Well, if you are representing blurred lines, like you literally have just broken all the rules, and now it insinuates to him subconsciously that there are no rules, well, you've just taken away his foundation of safety. And, so you're a threat to his safety just by wearing something that's outside the box or whatever. And so I'm just saying, in general, religion creates this structure, creates rules, and we used the word earlier, shoulds, that you should be this, you should be that. And this generation's come along and saying, I've said before, today I will not should on myself. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not going to, cast projections onto myself or others as to what they should or should not be. And if there's a God that is like saying, oh yeah, you better, or I'm gonna, rain down wrath, yeah, that's going to keep us locked in. But thanks be to evolution and agnosticism, we are starting to say no, and just breaking out. I think, taking the Etch-a-Sketch and just shaking it up to where we're starting over.
Yeah, I think that a lot of thanks goes to the advent of the internet as well. Totally. I mean, I don't think that I would have come out of my shell the way that I did, or as quickly. Granted, it took like a decade, but I don't think that I would have come out as quickly as I did had I not had access to all of that information and this wealth of diversity that comes with the internet. Now, there's obviously good and bad on the internet, but I think that one of the things that really gets me about the upcoming generations is their questioning of why, why do we do this? Why tradition? Why is tradition important? And I see that in my kids, where if somebody has them do something like the Pledge of Allegiance or whatever, and they're like, okay, I know that this is a thing that people have done historically, but why? Mm-hmm. And that is so encouraging to me.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Well, and think about this. I mean, I totally concur. We've said it a million times on the show that the internet, access to information, is very, very destructive to religions and dogmas and such, because they just can't stand. But I think it confirms this old adage: the more you know, the more you don't know. And that is, all right, so the church has come, given us all these definitions and these boxes, and then we know that the earth is 6,000 years old. We know that God exists and he's coming back, etc. We know all these things, all the certainty they have in the, and yet when we do actually get access to more information for real, like the internet, we actually, our certainties just start falling away, and we realize we don't know shit. So it really is, the more you know, the more you don't know. And so the trajectory to agnosticism is only going to increase every day.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the adage that the wise man is the one who knows that he doesn't know everything, and the fool is the one who does.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that that's true, and it's kind of, along the same lines of, the frequency and occurrence and strength of miracles drastically dropped off when cameras were invented. And
Oh yeah.
and so it's all of these things where, once you can admit, I don't know, or once you can say why, once you can bring yourself to just question general, what we would call common sense or general knowledge of certain things, then that's when you start to grow. And I think that that's my biggest problem with religion in the past and now and going forward, is that it stunts people. It stops you from being curious, and it stops you from learning because it tells you that it has the answers. And as long as people are in that mindset of, well, you may not know, but I do because God told me, or because this book told me, we are not going to grow, and we're not going to improve the way that we need to as a species.
Right. Well, before we get into your personal questions, one last question about your religion. I noticed in your bio that you gave your heart to Jesus at age 5. And I'm curious just as to the not only the nature of your relationship with God and Jesus, but I always like to, I don't know, I personally was like fucking best friends with Jesus. I mean, I was deeply intimate, countless hours, walks in the woods, walks and talks, and just intimate with God. Like, it was. So on that spectrum, like, I mean, how intimate did you feel with Jesus?
At times, I felt like Jesus was, with me, and, physically, like somebody that I could relate to and talk to and feel comfort from. And then at other times, we kind of felt like pen pals. And so there was this sort of waning and waxing of my fervor in religion, because I was essentially in church the Sunday after I was born. I grew up in the church being fed this stuff on, twice on Sundays, every Wednesday night, every single holiday, and then any other special occasions like VBS and all of that. I grew up in church almost literally. When I was very young, it was very real to me. I could feel it. I could, see it. And I knew it. And then once I got a little older, some of the stuff kind of didn't make sense to me, or I just kind of didn't really feel that presence. And so that's when the guilt would kick in, right? Because anytime that you don't have that personal relationship with Jesus Christ, you are made to feel that it's your fault. It's not that Jesus is doing anything wrong. It's not that he's hiding from you or anything. You just aren't doing it right. And so when you start feeling that guilt, there's this thing in the Southern Baptists tradition of a rededication. So you accept Jesus into your heart once and you are saved, you get baptized. But then during your life, as you kind of maybe fall out of communication with Jesus a little bit, you can rededicate yourself. And it's kind of this thing. You go up front to the altar and you say, I want to rededicate my life. And the pastor, everybody's so happy for you. And they do this little announcement, and you just kind of, you feel that like new car smell. You get that new car smell all over again, right? It's so exciting. And then, give it a couple of years and maybe it starts to fall off again. Well, you can always rededicate your life to Jesus Christ.
Sounds like a detox diet or something. Like, I need a detox. I've eaten too many cupcakes.
Can't you detox with cupcakes?
Yeah, obviously. Cupcakes are amazing. Fuck diets.
John, did you ever listen to Christian music?
Yes, I did.
Like, names, what are some of your favorites?
So I grew up with like Sandy Patty and Amy Grant and Michael W. Smith, and then got into, and Amy Grant, she was such a disappointment when she went into secular music. But all of that. And then I was in a musical family. So we all sang, we played the piano and the organ. I played the trumpet. And in the church, our role was kind of like the musical family. The special music is what we called it during the service. So I grew up with just all of this gospel music, all of these hymns, all of this classically beautiful praise music. That was my foundation for everything. And my dad was very distraught when in the 9th grade I discovered Metallica. But even then, after I discovered Metallica and I started feeling a little bit of guilt over, like listening to secular music, especially, metal, I started looking for Christian rock bands, and I came across like Petra. And then, I kind of found like DC Talk.
Audio Adrenaline.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And later on, so I don't know how many people actually listen to it, but I started to like want some heavier stuff. And I found this Christian death metal band called Mortification.
Oh, wow.
And I would not even be able to tell you what it sounds like now because it's been so long ago. But yeah, I was just like, I need something heavy and I want Jesus, That kind of stuff is hilarious that they would even make Christian death metal, but they do.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I have one question, just kind of to help kind of close up everything. If you could give one piece of advice to a listener out there that's struggling with their faith or their deconversion or from recovering from religion, just based on your experiences, is it possible for you to distill it down into one piece of advice or encouragement?
No, that's so hard because everybody's so different. I mean, anytime that, you listen to people's deconversion stories, and I'm really big on that as well. And everybody's got a different story. But I would say that one common theme is try to ask why you're doing something. Try to ask why you believe something. Don't ask what you believe, because that's easy. I believe that a serpent tempted a woman and that's why we have sin and cancer. Okay, fine. That's what you believe, but why would you believe that? And then if your only justification is because somebody told me or because I read it in a book, well, then maybe you need to read another book, or maybe you need to talk to another person and start getting those different perspectives. And I do feel like anybody who is starting to question why, anybody who is starting to kind of fall away from religion, it's very important not to shut yourself out. It's very important to find people, not just like seek out atheists, but find people who can love you and support you through what you're going through and be willing to talk and not be confrontational. And that's what's really going to help, because even if you decide, well, I started falling away from religion, but I feel like I'm heading back there. Well, I mean, at least you tried. Maybe you can try again later, Yeah. I mean, nobody's required to be an atheist. We can all be agnostic, right?
We already are.
Yeah.
So good advice. One of the questions that Marie and I have agreed that we need to do every week is, what is something that you're proud of?
Well, I think that going with the theme of this conversation, I'm really proud of my son.
Yeah.
And the kind of path that we walked and this journey that we took together, and finally, came back around full circle and are friends now. And I think that that's what really makes parenting rewarding. Like, it may take 22 years to actually feel rewarding, but that is something that I'm really proud of, because he has proven himself a successful, industrious, funny, and intelligent young man that I absolutely love him. So
well, good job, Dad.
Amazing.
So you have jumped out of a plane 12 times and fallen to the earth. What the fuck? And why is that?
Was it an accident every time?
No, actually, I've never been in a plane that didn't work. So I've always jumped out of perfectly good airplanes.
Why? And how does that make you feel?
Oh my gosh, it's exhilarating. It doesn't make me feel crazy, if that's what you're asking. But no, I mean, it's one of those things where getting the full human experience has been really important to me. And like jumping out of a plane may not be necessary. You can do other things and kind of feel these feelings. But, you know, jumping out of a plane was something that I wanted to do, like the feeling of flying, because as a human, I'm never going to do that. You know, no matter what our misconceptions are about evolution, we're never going to grow wings. So that was just one of the things that I wanted to do to really just fully experience myself, my feelings and nature and just reality. And yes, I could have died, I suppose, but that wasn't really going through my mind at the time.
Have you any injuries from it?
Nope. Actually, all of the injuries that I have ever had have been completely ground related.
Okay. All right. So you ride motorcycles on racetracks?
Yeah. Speaking of injuries, so yeah, I'm a really big motorcycle enthusiast. I ride race bikes and do track days independently. I'm not competitive, but yeah, I love motorcycles. Even though I have broken my hand, my neck, my collarbone.
Jesus Christ.
Sounds like a great hobby, John.
It's fantastic. You should try it.
Okay.
You are in the process of trying to complete a full sleeve tattoo, and so you're a tattoo enthusiast as well. Yep.
I've got oh my gosh, I think 16 tattoos if you want to count them individually at this point.
Yeah.
And have had various parts of my body pierced over time. But I feel like that self-expression is something that I really wanted. Like the things that I enjoy, the artwork that makes me feel good, I wanted to just carry it around with me. So in addition to all of my tattoos, I'm working on a full sleeve, which I can't wait to finish, but it's also very expensive. Just like skydiving, it's very expensive. So we'll see. We'll see when I get to finish that.
Do you want to share what it is? The sleeve?
It's actually all Marvel Comics themed. So it's like all my favorite characters kind of being mashed up into one big scene that I have in my head. And so far it's come along really, really well. I've got a great artist. He's fantastic.
Cool. What do you do for a living?
I'm a computer programmer.
Okay.
Cool.
What about, all right, so you and your girlfriend go to Mexico every year in April, and you're looking forward to that coming up. But I've been reading a lot about people dying on Mexican vacations. What do you know about that?
I don't know. I mean, the way that we do Mexican vacations is basically what my oldest son called Diet America. So we do all-inclusive resorts. And generally those are very safe, and there's not much contact with like anything outside of the resort unless you take excursions. But yeah, I don't really know about the dangers of vacationing in Mexico or which parts, but we've always been very safe and have had super enjoyable vacations.
Well, and you're no stranger to living dangerously, so.
That's true. But, you know, I don't want to get killed by a drug trafficker or something like that. But no, I like a little bit of danger in my life. So
how many siblings you got?
I have an older sister and a younger brother.
Are you in good relations with them these days?
I'm closer to my younger brother than I am to my sister. She tormented me when I was a kid, and that kind of strained our relationship on an ongoing basis. But she's also much more religious than my younger brother is, and so I kind of find it hard to relate to her.
And like you said earlier, the way you put it was, we do not have enough in common to really substantiate a relationship. And that's when I stopped, I was like, well put, It doesn't have to be, estranged or animosity. It's just, we don't have enough in common to, it is what it is.
Yep. Yeah. I don't fight with her. I just don't hang out with her.
Yeah.
And your mom and dad still together?
Yeah, my mom and dad have been, oh my gosh, we're coming up on 50 years.
Wow.
Wow.
How's your relationship with them now?
Kind of distant.
Yeah.
So my mom actually has very advanced MS, and so she is bedridden, and that's terrible. It's tragic, and some of the religious mentality kind of bleeds into how that situation is handled as well. But my dad, because he was never really the nurturing half of the parental units, I never really had a super close relationship with him. And so it's kind of just, we talk when there's news to be given, or, if we're going to get together for some family thing, very infrequently. But other than that, it's not really a close relationship.
What's your proximity to them and your siblings?
I'm about 5 hours away, like a 5-hour drive from my parents, but my siblings are scattered between Colorado and Alaska.
And you're where?
I'm in Missouri.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not too far from you, respectively. I'm in Minnesota.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You're not too far, and I don't think Cass is too far either.
No?
No, you're kind of in the middle of us.
Yeah. Very centrally located.
Next time I drive to Tennessee, or actually, I'm going to drive to Kansas this summer. I should stop by and get a beer with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Look me up.
That'd be fun. Yeah.
Well, I would love to too, because I find you to be a fascinating person, and I like how you think, and I like, you're just even keel, and
Yeah.
you as crazy as your hobbies are, your personal anchor is fairly conservative. I mean, it's just.
Yeah.
It's just pretty tight. I don't know. I really appreciated getting to know you today.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here. Do you want to plug your show real quick before we close down?
Yeah, I don't want to plug it too hard. We have, obviously a back catalog, and I have 2 more episodes that I need to publish. But the podcast is kind of going into a hiatus for a while.
Okay.
I've been dealing with some mental health issues and some craziness in life. So the podcast kind of has to take a backseat sometimes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, either way, the archives are out there,
Absolutely. We have 3 seasons up for everyone to listen to if you want. It's called The Wayward Willis. And on Twitter, we are at Wayward Willis. And on Facebook, we're The Wayward Willis. And then we are on Spreaker. We're on iTunes, Google Play, pretty much anywhere that you can find podcasts. I tried to make it as easy as possible to find us. So if you search for The Wayward Willis, chances are you'll be able to find us.
Yeah.
And you have a co-host, Ron, right?
Yeah, Ron is the replacement for my son, Logan, when Logan decided that he just didn't give a shit about religion anymore. And he just didn't want to talk about it. And so Ron came on, and we it's really interesting because Ron is a little more political, and we're both very progressive. And so the show kind of took a little bit of a turn from strictly religious to kind of political. And so we talk about a very wide range of things. And Ron is a great guy. I'm so sad that he couldn't be here today, but he's just really great. He's younger than me. I call him my adopted son. So,
But do you guys tape in the same room, or is he in another city, or?
Oh no, he lives in New York. So we try to coordinate our schedules and record remotely, kind of like you do.
Gotcha.
How did you meet him?
Actually, I met him through another podcast. So one of my other favorite political podcasts, political and humor, is Dumb All Over.
Yeah.
And the Dumb All Over podcast is a couple of great guys that have formed with us the famous Original Podcast Network. And so we just kind of grouped in a bunch of podcasts, and Ron had 1 or 2 in that network, and we started talking and hit it off. So that's how we got together.
That's cool.
Very cool. Well, thanks for talking, man. It's been fun.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
I really appreciate you inviting me.
So, what you talking about, Willis?
I'm sorry. I thought the same thing. I just refrained.
I'm sure he's gotten it all of his life, too.
I just think he's sharp, and it's a good, strong.
Yeah.
When people come through it, and come through the loss of faith, etc., and just, most of us are just trying to find our footing, because that which we thought was our footing turned out to be a myth, and then there is no footing. So how do you find footing when there is none, and meaning where there is none, and purpose where there is none? And I don't know. He just seems like he really landed on his feet, and it's good to hear and experience a strong post-Christian story every now and then.
Yeah. He kind of reminded me a little bit of Tim Riemel.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Just kind of this solid.
You mean that's not who that was?
Yeah, they reminded me a lot of each other. And
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting what he was talking about, like the advice that he gave about asking yourself why instead of what do I believe? Why do I believe what I believe? And at the time I was like, that sounds like street epistemology.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
asking yourself how you came to arrive to believing the things that you believe, given like what were the sources of the knowledge that you rely on to inform your opinion, which I think is a great question to have. And it's hard to do, to honestly ask yourself why you believe what you believe, because we have like a bias against seeing that authentically, I think. But that was a really good piece of advice for me.
An overarching theme is cut yourself some slack.
Yeah.
We're coming out of a ideology that says it's bad to be you. And you got to dot your I's and cross your T's in order to be successful or maintain your faith or, whatever. Just a busy, pressurized, expectational world.
Yeah.
And coming out of that and just saying, stop beating yourself up for whatever you used to beat yourself up for.
Yeah.
And be okay without like being controlled by parameters and dogma and stuff that used to give your life a grid.
Yeah.
Now, there's no grid. And so,
yeah, I have to constantly remind myself that there's no one in charge of me. Like,
yeah,
I think that's one of those things that still hangs on, that you feel like you have someone to answer to, or some kinds of expectations to meet. And maybe that has to do with still the cultural element, because our culture still informs us how we're supposed to be in the world. But I mean, once you release religion, maybe you can start releasing cultural expectations too. But it's constantly like, I have to remind myself there's no one to answer to, except for myself, and to respect the autonomy of the people around me. But then other than that, you just figure out how you want to lead your life, and there's no one to answer to. Right.
And here's the wonderful, beautiful irony of that. That sounds like that you're mitigating or losing or minimizing accountability. Right? There's nobody to answer to. That sounds like no accountability. However, as you and I both know, we're actually more accountable, because in this case, we're accountable to us, and we are a real thing. Whereas before, we were accountable to God, which is not a real thing. It does not exist. So we really weren't accountable. So it's kind of like what John was talking about, that phrase, love is never having to say, I'm sorry. Think about the non-accountability that's embedded in that, and how when Jesus has taken my sin upon himself, like the people that I've sinned against, I just can move on because I'm forgiven by God. And I don't, I'm just saying that sometimes within that ironic context of you'd think you're heavily accountable to God, in the real world, I find Christians to be highly irresponsible and unaccountable, because they don't care about the earth. They actually don't care about their own maturation. I mean, how much we've talked about arrested development within Christianity. They let go and let God. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The other thing that was said, and I love it, and that, when we kind of got off in that kick that there's no such thing as women, and there's no such thing as...
Is that what we said?
I did. I said it in response to what you were saying, because oftentimes people say things like women love sex or women don't like sex. And it's like, how can you even say such a broad brushing fucking, oversimplification? Obviously there's no two women's sexuality the same.
Yeah.
And so there is no such thing as women in that context. Right. And so I think there are places where we need to release ourselves from these boxes and definitions that can kind of lock us in or oversimplify things, And then what I often find in this line of thinking, and it goes back to like, I'm colorblind, I don't see color, is that we can say, okay, there's no such thing as women, and you're not going to put me in a box, and such and such. But after a while, I think that there is a place for us to say, well, actually, my blackness does matter. Actually, the fact that I'm a woman does matter to me in this way, not in the way that you were broad brushing me, but I don't want to just throw out, and this is where you get into just identity politics and stuff. It's like, wait, it matters that I'm a woman and in this context. And so, you know what I'm saying? I just think it's balanced. I mean, we're not just going to take out all these definitions, because even though they are what divide us, they are also what give us, some kind of culture.
Yeah, but I mean, they can't be used as black and white, like you're saying. And I think each person gets to decide what that identity means to them. Yeah. Like, my identity as a woman matters. Like, when I hear you say, my identity as a woman matters, ... my first thought is, my identity as a woman matters because the culture tells me it does. You know, and like, that's the only thing I can think of. Like, otherwise, I just feel like a human being who happens to be mostly straight, who has a vagina and boobs. And like, I don't feel like an over-identification with the word woman, because it adds nothing. It adds nothing to who I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but it's the culture in which you find yourself. And so, you've got to play by these fucking rules, but it doesn't mean you have to like them or.
I refuse. No, I'm not going to, actually.
Right. And along those lines, reminds me of something that you said as far as this homocurious or biromantic. That's what it was.
Yeah.
As opposed to just bisexual, biromantic. And when you were explaining that, what came into my imagination is a world where my relationship to each person is truly shaped by the dynamics between me and that person with no boundaries. So if I'm romantic with that person, irregardless of their gender, if I'm sexual with that person, as long as it's obviously consensual and it's a two-way intimate, I mean, it's a feeling, we both want that thing, I could literally have a unique and untethered relationship with everybody in my life.
Yep.
It may or may not involve sex, and even if it does or doesn't, it doesn't matter.
Right. And that's why I think labels can limit us.
For sure.
Like, I trust that everyone knows themselves as much as they can, right? But I think that there's a part of us that, like, I don't think I do. I don't think I do know the extent of myself. I think that I am, there's a lot more that I could be were I to explore some other things. But right now, like, when I talk about my identity, gender-wise or sexual-wise, like, I'll throw out some words, but then I use them in a very vague way. Like, I'm like heterosexual-ish.
Right.
Like, I don't know.
Right.
Like, and it all kind of draws me towards a word that I don't want to use, because I don't think it's identity politics again. But the pansexuality is something that I find myself intrigued by, because the way that I think about using that word, if I were to identify myself as pansexual, would mean that I'm attracted to whoever the fuck I'm attracted to. Right. If we did a statistical chart of who is Marie attracted to, you would see some statistically significant numbers across people who are masculine presenting with beards, who are taller than about 5'10", and you would see a bump in the numbers there.
Right.
But there are some significant, there are some other bumps across the grid as well. And why would I want to just be like, all those little bumps don't even matter, I'm going to focus on this big one over here? Like, you limit yourself. And so that's why I kind of, in theory, I like the idea of thinking that maybe we're all pansexual. Like, it's another way of saying that sexuality is a spectrum. I don't think that we get to decide what we are. I think we should just show up and find out how we feel.
Exactly.
Do I feel romantic with this person? No, I can't, because I already said that I'm heteroromantic, so I can't feel. So then you start policing your own identity instead of just showing up with your feelings and figuring out how you feel in the context of this relationship, and then treating it as a unique engagement. Yep. And letting the relationship create itself instead of your identity informing how you're going to proceed with it.
Yeah. We make the path by walking it.
Yeah.
I learned who Cass Midgley is by being him.
Yeah.
And it happens in real time. And yeah, I might, in your case, I'll speak for myself. I was going to say beards and 5'2" or whatever, or 5'10", but in my case, brunettes or whatever, and hot legs or something, whatever I'm attracted to. But that's not ultimately, that's literally very, very shallow idea of what I'm attracted to, because if I encounter a human being who's not brunette and doesn't have hot legs, and yet her or his personality and chemistry with me is just fucking amazing, then it's not his aesthetics that are attractive to me. So it's both and so we make the path by walking it. We figure out who we are sexually and relationship really and romantically by showing up. And having that freedom to give yourself and the people in your life that you are romantic with as well the permission to do that, navigate that in real time. Like if I'm at the store and somehow I engage in a conversation with somebody that I'm just really enjoying, and by that I mean just enjoying, like whether it's an attraction or whatever, it's just like I don't know. I want to be so free from all these Christian constraints that says, okay, you shouldn't be talking to another woman, like the Pence mindset of I shouldn't be having lunch with another woman or whatever. I want so badly to be free of all that, of just all fear of where this is going to go. And because all right. So the reason we do that is because people can get hurt. Well, love hurts and life hurts, and I can put myself in a rubber room for the rest of my life and not hurt anybody, or I can live it. Like John jumping out of planes and stuff. There really is there's a thrust and a push to where it's like I really want to fully experience the human condition or the human experience. And honestly, jumping out of a plane, for the first time in my life, that sounded fun.
I know, right? I was like, oh, I haven't done that yet.
I haven't done that, and he's no injuries involved, and 12 times.
Yeah.
And that's a solo fall too. Like, you're not tethered, you're not tied to a professional. Like I would be on my first fall, probably. That's
a pretty good statistical outcome. Like he fell 12 times and didn't die. Like that's pretty impressive. Like
no broken ankles even.
No. Because it can hurt when you land on the ground there.
That's what I was trying to get to. And he's like, nope. But on the motorcycle, broke my neck.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? How can you break your neck and still walk away? I guess that's a thing.
Yeah.
No, but I guess just the whole pan thing. We've said it before on the show, and I think you regrettably even borrowed the phrase the last time we talked about something, and you said it's a journey, not an arrival or a destination or something. It really is. We're just making it up as we go, and that's the slack. That's the grace that I'm talking about, giving ourselves for being human. That Christianity has none of. And so here we find ourselves.
And there was only other one point I wanted to make about it was just more of like a funny observation and just my like resentment of culture in general. When we were talking to John about how his parents were approaching their 50th anniversary, and like I could hear in my head like probably the people in his parents' community or like their friends or whatever being like, wow,
what an achievement.
Congratulations. Wow, 50 years together. But when I heard 50 years together and knowing how his parents are religious and stuff, I was like, that's so sad.
Yeah.
So sad.
It sounds like hell.
50 years with the same person in a religious like environment like that. Like, it's not that I want to like end any relationship that I'm in, but I highly value feeling free to leave it. If I want to. I don't know. I felt that way 2 years ago when my husband and I celebrated our was it our 5th wedding anniversary together, even though we don't really give a fuck about our marriage anymore. Like I would have preferred, if it had been now, I probably wouldn't marry him because I don't really care about marriage anymore. But we wanted to throw a party, so we just use it as an excuse. But even then I was like, I don't even feel like putting 5 years like the language, hey, it's our 5-year anniversary in the invite, because it's like, so what?
Yeah.
Like, so fucking what? Because usually the language around that is like, oh, wow, you survived it. Oh, wow, yeah, it takes a lot of work. Marriage takes a lot of work. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Like, if it took that much work, I'd probably, like, not be in it. Like, it shouldn't be that hard. I don't know. That's my opinion. But, like, I didn't feel like celebrating 5 years. It was more like, okay, I'm willing to celebrate 5 years of a great marriage, like if we're going to contextualize it that way, but nobody ever asks, is it a great marriage? They're focused on, oh, did you get another year? Did you get another year? Did you get another year? Nobody's talking about, yeah, how good a quality
Right.
were those years that you were together? And I just hate the fixation on the numbers. Like,
would you say for logistic reasons or insurance or reasons? I mean, or would you marry for the benefits of having a legal document?
I don't know. I'd have to research what the laws are in the state, because obviously insurance is a good thing, and I'd be curious to see what our tax returns would look like if we weren't actually married. And I don't know if there's like domestic partnership benefits that could be had, but otherwise, I don't really feel like I don't even like calling him my husband, because it makes me feel part of a culture that I'm not a part of. He's my nesting partner. He's someone I live with. He's someone I share finances with. He's someone who I love deeply and that I could see myself being with for a very long time. I don't see him as my husband. My husband, that means so many things.
Right.
It means so many things that I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't espouse. I have 3 partners. I don't really feel like I have a husband.
In the lexicon of poly, you have, I've heard this nesting term. What are the other 2 guys? Is there a term for what their role is in your life?
Not really. Like, nesting, I mean, is an important label because it defines what you guys share together. But if you don't share that together, then it's kind of customized from there. Like, well, what do you share together? So the other people in my life, they're just my, not just, they're important, but they're my boyfriends. I don't live with them. I don't share finances with them. I see them a couple times a week, and that's what it means to me to be my boyfriend. And I don't know. I don't know that there are any other words. I guess I don't know of any other ones.
Okay. Yeah, no, so I just thought there might have been a textbook or something on it.
Not that I know of.
I don't think it made it on the tape, but what do you think about the comment that John made when he said, the most romantic thing that my girlfriend and I have ever said to each other is, I never want to get married?
Because it's realistic.
Right? I mean, I knew that was going to be like right up your alley.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I was like, that's beautiful. Like, I don't know if I would say that's the most romantic thing, but it sure is fucking realistic. And yeah, I don't know. That's the biggest word that I come away with. It's realistic. It's like, I choose to be with you today, and every day is a choice. And I'm not going to buy into this whole like getting married thing and having this big ceremony and having our whole community come and stand around us and being like, good job on doing this thing of like saying that you're everything for each other. But again, like we were talking about, you get to define what sex is, you get to define what love is. And I think you can, if you want to get married, you can define what marriage means to you and your partner. So like whatever floats your boat. I don't really fucking care. I just don't want to do it.
Yeah. And I think one way that comment to each other, John and his girlfriend saying, I never want to get married, could be at least romantic or something, is that in the world of romance and dating, then to find someone who feels that same way, such that when they say it to them, you're like relieved, as opposed to, that's a deal breaker.
Yeah.
They can both look at each other and say, I got something I want to say, and it might be a deal breaker, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I never want to get married again. Is that okay with you? And, and for him or her to go, yes, oh my God, I feel the same way, Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a scary thing to do. Like if I had had that experience, years ago, 2, 3 or more years ago, like have a partner that I was nesting with who I wanted to be with for a very long time, have them say, I don't ever want to get married. Like I would have been shook to the core. Like I would feel extremely insecure. Yeah. I would feel like they didn't truly love me, that they weren't willing to commit to me or whatever. Yeah, that would have been really hard to deal with. But I see things a lot differently now, and I wouldn't feel that way.
Yeah, it's just another way that everything's changing. I mean, we're just we're re-examining everything.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is sacred. No sacred cows, right?
Mm-hmm. I prefer it that way.
Yeah, he murdered all his though. I just euthanized one. That was very gentle.
I loved the aggressive word choice. I get a little bit aggressive when I think about religion too,
Heck yeah.
so I can empathize with that.
Really, Marie? Kickboxing. You know, you've got the picture of Jesus on your big punching bag.
The mitt. Yeah. No, I know. Yeah, it's a surprise to everyone, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, thanks for hanging out. It was fun.
Yeah, no problem. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Sure enough.
Bye.
You taught me the courage of stars before you left. How light carries on endlessly, even after death, with sureness of breath. You explain the infinite, how rare and beautiful it is to even exist. I couldn't help but ask you to say it all again. I tried to write it down, but I could never find the pen. I'd give anything to hear you say it one more time, that the universe was made just to be seen by my eye. I couldn't help but ask you to say it all again. I tried to write it down, but I could never find the pen. I'd give anything to hear you say it one more time, that the universe was made just to be seen by my eyes. The shortness of breath, I'll explain.